Hello and welcome to a new episode of the Game Informer Show. I'm your host, Ben Hansen, joined by David Milner.
Hello.
Welcome, sir.
Thank you for having me. G'day.
Yeah, if you couldn't tell from that accent, he's all the way from Australia, and where it gets confusing for listeners, he's a Game Informer employee.
That's correct.
In the family, at least, is probably a better way to frame it.
That's right. When you open the magazine in Australia, it's my little ranty letter at the start instead of Andy's.
That's amazing. So you're editor-in-chief for Game Informer Australia?
I just editor. Andy's still editor-in-chief.
Okay, so just editor.
Wait,
but Game Informer Australia.
Does that mean that Game Informer Australia readers don't get to read Andy's ranty letters ever?
Ever.
Don't get to or don't have to.
Hey-o. We're excited to have you. So it's
Thank you.
basically once a year we run into you at E3, and it's exciting because you feel like a distant cousin, where you're a very exciting cousin to have, and so it's like the kind of family reunion where it's like, oh, I really want to just corner this one guy and talk and not talk about babies and all the other boring stuff. So we're excited to have you here. Let's talk about games. Let's talk about Australia.
Awesome.
We're also joined by Capcom's Tim Turry.
Hello, hi Dave.
G'day,
It's
Tim.
good to meet you in person.
It's really pleasant, isn't it? Tim, former co-host of this very podcast.
That's right. I'm back. Here we go.
You've been back on a lot, but it's an
Hey.
honor to have you,
Yeah,
dude.
I maybe haven't bugged you as much at like the beginning of this year as I was last year, but like I'm coming back to bug you as much as I can.
I love it. We also have old howling madman Joe Juba.
Oh,
Thank you.
That's
Joe
pretty-
Juba's here.
That's like end of day 2 E3 howl.
Sorry.
Subpar howls. Love it. All right,
we
everybody. We got a lot to cover. And then back half of the show, in theory, we're going to have some guest developers, just like last night. But it all depends on whether or not they walk through the door. So we'll see how it goes.
You might be stuck with us longer than you want.
Yeah. But for right now, how's the show going for you guys? Tim, Dave, what's it like in your worlds?
It's hectic. It's
Yeah.
crazy out there. I mean, this seems like a good place to talk about the open to the public thing.
Yeah, what do you think of it?
It's definitely harder to get to appointments. Like, I mean, that's the obvious thing to say. I mean, if you don't know, basically they've sold 15,000 public tickets. I don't think there are 15,000 more people there than last year. I think a lot of journalists might have lost their jobs in the last year, perhaps to balance it out a little
Oh,
bit.
interesting.
But
The great cycle.
yeah, the great cycle. What's the publisher's perspective?
Yeah, I mean it's generally the same thing where like I feel like it's I in principle am happy to have more people coming and checking out games and like, you know, specifically Capcom games, like bring them on in, like that whole thing. But like it
wanna see
doesn't
Mega Man
it doesn't-
9?
Yeah, yes, please. It's a good game. I remind you, it's one of my favorites. But yeah, no, that's the thing is that like it feels like it's the same E3 but with just way more people and there's not like wider aisles or anything like that or it is really hard to get around. Oh boy.
I haven't really noticed like that the layout has changed that much. Doesn't seem like there's more open booths. And so just wandering around, especially day one, we shot a tour video which will be up probably next week. It'll give you a good sense of just how packed it is here. But there's not that many more booths to play at. But things I've noticed is I was in Microsoft's booth today and they were doing a lot of screaming and like throwing out T-shirts. And
Yeah.
so I don't think that would normally happen at E3. It's a very paxy
Not
type
at
thing. It's
Microsoft
fun.
anyway.
Yeah. Also, a lot more people coming into Game Informer's booth in like our exhibition hall,
Yeah.
which can be nice when it's a fan. They're
fine.
like, "Hey, I'm from the Overblood group. Just want to say hi. Thank you so much." I think that's lovely. But you know, they're not everyone's great.
I ran into an Overblood fan on the way over here,
Oh,
and
really?
he said, "Hey," and I told him he should absolutely go bug you, but I told him to knock
cool.
first. Knock.
There's
that-
just a simple knock is all we ask for. But the other thing, this is a weird takeaway, but I realized it today. More wheelchairs on the show floor. Have you guys noticed that?
I've seen a few.
Yeah, there's more people in wheelchairs. It's like, oh, that's right. I guess maybe there's not very represented in the press, but like it's great to
yeah.
see everybody out and about. Yeah,
Yeah,
That's a good point. I hadn't thought about that.
I've seen a lot of the lines are obviously longer too. You know what I mean? Like,
What's the longest you've seen? I heard that people were queuing 4 to 5 hours for Call of Duty.
is that right?
That's
Yeah,
the
oh
number
my
one.
gosh.
I feel like
what I
the
heard.
Nintendo ones
Yeah.
are super long also.
But like Nintendo has like a ton of kiosks, so like good on them for that. Like there's
Yeah.
a ton.
But
Well,
you
all
got,
of New
you
Donk
got to
City.
wonder, these E3's been this big dream for a lot of people that couldn't
Yeah.
go, and all of a sudden they can, and I hope it hasn't ruined that for them if they're just standing in line all day.
I don't think it. Okay, so I have two stories about the press thing. One is just sort of a general feeling about it, which is like you walk by a group of people who have the expo pass or whatever, the public pass.
Yeah.
And like there isn't like there's an enthusiasm for the games there that, I mean, and that's not to say the press isn't enthusiastic, because like we are obviously, but we're also here to do work. So like we have to go, like we don't always have time to just sit and bask in the like, wow, look at like so many good games, so many big companies, so many like prominent industry figures all over the place. And I think seeing that sort of like, I don't want to make it sound like stupid, but like there's a certain just sort of like wide-eyed wonder that comes with like your first E3.
Totally.
And there's so much more of that on the floor that enthusiasm is actually like kind of energizing.
Yeah, that's why I think PAX ends up being a lot of people. You'll hear
Feels like a PAX.
You'll be like, PAX is my favorite show.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
I think the combination of that enthusiasm plus like the weight of E3 reveals and news is like it's hitting, and you feel that like electricity. Yeah, it's harder to get around, but I think it's like it might be a rocky first attempt at it, but like I think it's a good thing to move towards if you want to maintain E3 at the scope that it is. You know what I mean?
I guess so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you? So there are other shows like Gamescom does the press and the public thing, and I think they've got a better balance of how they handle
Well,
it.
they separate it by days, right?
Oh,
Well, they're also two
business days.
separate areas. There's
Right.
and they get 200,000 people in those.
That's wild.
halls, whereas the press is just a quiet, contained business area without the T-shirt guns and the rock music,
Yeah.
and it's very easy to do your job.
I think the business area is something that if E3 continues in this direction or gets even bigger would be like super nice. I think we'd all
Yeah.
appreciate it. But-
Yeah.
Because you want to be able to go opt in to like that experience that you're talking about.
Yeah.
You know?
But it is still just wild to me, like seeing so much raw enthusiasm in the public, and it's great. And then I just want to, like, just how E3 is always a reminder of how small this industry is and how accessible it is. Like, I've run into Mark Cerny, I think 4 times walking through the halls, and I just want to like stop people that are coming from the public for the first time and be like, do you know who this guy is?
right?
Do you know how important this dude
Yeah.
is? You're walking right by him.
Don't brush past him.
Yeah.
Also,
Kiss
don't
his
bother him
shoes.
though. Don't bother him.
Please, he's very important. Please.
Respectfully bow at the midsection.
I have so my second story about the public stuff is that I was in a demo this morning, and I don't want to name any names, but there were some conversations with some other press folks that were happening that reminded me very much of the same conversations that were happening the year before we went to Weird Santa Monica E3.
Oh.
Okay.
In the like, it is getting so hard for the journalists to do what they're here to do because of that crowd.
Really? Do you buy that?
I don't totally buy into it. Like I haven't had that much problem, but they were, and it sounded so much like what the conversations that were happening the year before. The ESA was like, people can't do work at E3, so we're just going to split it up into a bunch of weird hotels out in Santa Monica. So I'll be interested to see it. Well, A, if the E3 format stays the same as it is this year, and B, if it does, whether like how they adjust or adapt to that like public edition.
I would imagine the larger E3 entity that they enjoy the enthusiasm, and like I can only see it sliding more towards the public. Like if some journalists are going to be whiny about it, like who gives an ass? They're still going to come if they want the reveals. Like
What I'd like to know is how the experience was for. It was interesting for me because I didn't actually fly out until Monday, so I was like at home over the weekend, like watching press conferences and just like.
Oh, you actually watched it?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. 100%. Like,
Okay.
Can't quit that. But like, explain to my girlfriend why this thing's important, or just who this person is.
what Reggie's speech was about when he was
she's-
talking about the game.
No, I didn't. I couldn't put that. No, she's a very patient lady.
Honey, I thought you've already played Shadow of the Colossus.
Right. No, 100.
Hold on. Though.
It's a little. Oh, that was super exciting.
Hey,
I didn't know what I wanted. I forgot about that part.
Oh, by the way, just real quick on that note, I was in the Sony booth today, and I talked to the producer of the remake.
Oh.
And I asked him about if Ueda was involved, and he's like, "Yes, he is. We're going to go
Oh.
more into it in the future, but Ueda is at least part of the process, which is good
Wow.
to hear."
Just to go on that detour for a
Yeah.
second, I just played the game. I read through Nick Sutner's Shadow of the Colossus book.
Thanks to me.
Super good. Thank you for the recommendation. Yeah, it was actually literally your copy.
Yeah.
Awesome companion piece for the whole thing. For this coming up, I would absolutely recommend people check that out as they play it for the second time, presumably, or an additional time. And I just want to know if, like, I think about the controls of The Last Guardian. I love The Last Guardian.
Yeah.
And I admit that it's like a little tough to control sometimes, but it's very intentional. I get why that happens, and I know that Ueda's stance on that. But so it makes me wonder if this remaster, think about like, other remasters that have happened, like they might update the controls. Like, I wonder how it will feel.
Yeah, this is their opportunity, and the producer is being very vague naturally, but I was just trying to get a sense of like where on the spectrum are you landing? Like fully faithful remake or are we steering more in the direction of like let's reinterpret some things, maybe add some areas, make it a little bit funkier for fans? That I feel like that PS3 remaster wasn't that long ago, and he's like, we're being faithful. But I mean, there wasn't as clear cut as we're gonna tweak the controls.
Man, because there's some of those answers. Because like what we saw in that trailer just looked like completely faithful.
Yeah, 100%.
But there's also that stuff about I guess if you guys have read the book, I haven't. But isn't there stuff about like lost colossi that like, didn't
100%.
make it and stuff? So it's like if those are restored or
also
something,
if they
that'd be
make it like a
awesome.
random dice roll, whether or not aggro dies,
Yeah,
falls, that'd be really
that's
satisfying.
all you care about and
Yeah.
think about before you go to bed at night.
It's something
I
that
get
makes
it.
me feel.
But yeah, I know like we're lingering on this thing, but like I at first I saw it, I'm like, is this Shadow of the Colossus 2? Would they go that route? And I was still happy to see that it was like a remaster, but I would love it if it was like a faithful remaster, but then there's also like some weird remix mode, like fighting the monsters that have different behaviors or
Dubstep.
something, dubstep.
How quickly did you realize it was a remaster? Because I just wasn't sure in the theater.
You know what? They showed like some really iconic, like there's like they showed the first Colossi basically.
Yeah.
Old vanilla.
For me, it's the
old
one
vanilla.
that you fight. I think it's the third or
The sword
fourth.
guy?
The one that you fight like out on that pedestal with the
Totally.
really the tall one with the long sword. It's like, well, that's undeniably that is a very particular environment and enemies. So
It'd be so fun to go back and like have the same Colossi or Colossus or whatever, and then it's like you try to go do those things that you remember, like their weaknesses being, and it's just like different.
Oh, you want the Resident Evil
I'm
remake
a sucker
twist?
for that kind of thing, but I didn't
Well, hang on. Where you're going with that was you originally said, I watched the press conferences, so it was weird flying in Monday.
Oh yeah. So it was like, I wonder what that experience was like for people that flew out over the weekend. Like, hey, I want to be at E3. I'm maybe going to the EA Play thing. Consumers like, I wonder how they consume the press conferences, because I know that's not part of the package, is it? Like,
No, very limited seating. In
yeah,
this.
right.
Yeah.
So I wonder if there was a theater that they could go to, like a, what are those things called where it's like
A spillover room kind of
yeah,
thing?
like a spillover room or like a movie theater that was running them or something. I
Well,
don't know.
Sony was screening their conference in theaters.
Oh, they
Which
were
is so
okay.
smart.
Which is
I
cool.
still want to
It's
do
very
that
cool
at
touch.
some point.
Right?
The first year that I don't go to E3, I feel like forget Game Informer home team. I'm going to go to one of those theaters
Yeah.
to experience it.
Sit
But
alone.
Dave, we haven't talked to anybody yet that's been to the press conferences. Was there a moment that really shocked you being in the room there?
The start of the Ubisoft conference was supremely cool, but supremely weird. I felt very confused by the Rabbids and Miyamoto being on stage. It was,
Oh, yeah.
It's definitely the surreal moment for me, and I was still jet lagged, hadn't really slept that night. So that was definitely the moment that stood out the most for me. I did feel like that was far and away the best press conference.
I
don't know
think
if you
I'm
know-
with you.
Yeah, I liked the fact that they had devs on stage. Everyone else seemed to just go for back-to-back trailers. You don't need the dev to give the whole spiel, but just a little bit of an elevator pitch. It just makes it feel like less like you're being advertised to.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, especially, I mean, like, so Sony's had some problems, I think, in the past with, like, well, every company has. I shouldn't single out Sony. I'm thinking about the Powers section a couple of years, like
Oh,
3 or 4
God,
years
right,
ago. But,
right.
like,
Oh, yeah.
like, every company has problems with, like, getting someone up there, and then it's just like, oh, this demo's going on too long.
James Cameron won't shut the
Yeah.
phone.
Oh, man, that guy can talk.
It's like I'm normally super interested in hearing you talk, but not when there is another Rayman trailer right after you, buddy.
I love
But
Pele, but
I think on the flip side, I think going too far to the other side of the spectrum, where it's just like, here's a trailer, like that doesn't give me anything I want. Like
Totally.
I want to know,
Yep.
like what do you, the people who are creating this game, want me to take away from what I just saw?
Even if that's like, a company man coming out after the Shadow of the Colossus trailer saying like, holy shit, right guys, you get a load of that, we're bringing it back. You just like want that even if it's slightly insincere.
Okay, imagine the clarity it would add if just like after we saw that trailer for Shadow of the Colossus, someone's out there, it's like, here it is, Blue Point Games completely remaking Shadow of the Colossus with some new content that fans will be surprised by. It's like that, just that little 10-second spiel
Right.
could add, could stoke so many more like flames of enthusiasm for that.
There's definitely, I think, it's an art form. There's some titles and announcements that definitely could use a little bit more explanation, a little bit more ceremonious like reveal. And there's some that's just like, hey, let's rattle off some like really cool looking indie games that will get you Googling and stuff.
You
So.
think about like how much it would kind of slow down a press conference to like Trek, every developer out there. But I'm thinking back to Microsoft. I think one of the things they did really well, and I don't know if it's the first year they did it, but they just had like developers on stage on those weird pedestals ready to go, right? Like Dave, you're in the room. I don't know if you had a better sense of this, but it's just like, hey, spotlight, this guy's already in there. It's the Shadow of War creative director, saying like, hey, here's what's new. All right, bye. You don't have to stop and wait and do like a round of applause for every person walking out to the middle of the stage.
It felt
Just
very
bam,
slick,
bam, bam.
the pacing was spot on at Microsoft.
Yeah, Microsoft was amazing too.
I'm curious. So the only press conference I went to, and it's the first one I went to since my first year at Game Informer, and it was very quickly realized, we can't actually do work at any of these, these press conferences, so it didn't go anymore. And I loved like one of my favorite memories is like covering the press conferences from the war room, right, and like being in it. But it was
Shay's
fun.
here now.
We should probably take this conversation offline, but I have some things to say. But no, I'm just kidding. Shay's fine. But it was really, of all of the press conferences to get back to and be in the audience for, like this year's Sony press conference, I want to hear how it came across to you. For me, I was very impressed. I knew exactly what they're going for, but like it felt like a Metallica concert in parts. There's just like
the Call of Duty.
Like there's the smoke coming down. They're timing gunshots and explosions with the trailer. I don't know if any of this came across to you guys, but like Days Gone, they had when they were going through the part where it's like a narrow and like there's the bodies hanging and he's going through that. Yeah. They lowered like Cirque du Soleil zombie people.
They did not even show
and
that.
Then when they started twitching and freaking out in the game, those actors
started
freaking out.
That wasn't on the stream. Did you guys miss that?
Yeah, that's.
I must have missed that. Yeah,
it was wild.
So they did show a shot of the stage at one point, but I thought those were just like props or something. Whoa!
I saw like there's like snow before like the Horizon Zero Dawn expansion, like that easy stuff to see. But most of the time it would cut to you're just distracted by people looking bored in the audience, checking their phones.
Yeah.
I wasn't focusing on what bodies were dangling in the background.
But you saw like the waterfall, like sitar.
Yeah.
So it was like that vibe, but like there was like a very immersive element to it. It was impressive. It was fun.
It was cool.
Yeah.
I feel like last year's Sony's conference, I don't know if they'll ever top that. They had a 90-piece symphony orchestra in the audience.
Yeah.
Just a God of War.
And it just sounded incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah, so...
And that sweet Crash Bandicoot, Hideo Kojima walk on stage. Yeah, this is one of the weakest Sony press conferences for, I think, since the PS4's debut, probably.
I think so. I would absolutely agree with that. I was really surprised with that. And I guess it was the things that were missing. Like Dan Tack, I just wanted Bloodborne 2. That's all I wanted.
Hey, look, Game Informer America fan over here. Miller. Hey, can you just because it's such a bizarre notion, just set the scene for what Game Informer Australia is like, what that office is like, everything about it.
Oh, we're a smaller operation than you guys because, we use a lot of your magazine. It's myself on staff, maybe 4 or 5 freelancers. In terms of the content balance, it would be between maybe 25% Australian up to 50 if we've had a really good month running around chasing stories. But yeah, that sort of thing.
And so you just get all of Game Informer America, and then you say, we could lose these articles here. The Joe Juba reviews, let's get these out of here. Let's slap in some Australian-focused stuff.
That Madden cover story.
That's out of there.
Actually, it is kind of funny. So Dave and I correspond regularly because,
really?
Well, yeah, to like talk about the reviews section and stuff like that. Because they actually send their issue a little later than us, so there's stuff that we can't get in our print issue that they can get in theirs.
Okay.
But part of the funny thing is that so I frequently get emails from Dave that are like, hey, these are reviews we're looking at. And almost every month, one of them is invariably some like Australian indie game that I have to be like, yeah, we're not doing anything on that one.
And it gets confusing sometimes when you guys review a game that we don't, where it's like, what? We gave what a what? I don't remember that. Like, oh, okay. It's just that line is so confusing to us.
I like causing trouble for you guys.
Yeah, we appreciate it, man.
I remember when I was at Game Informer, was it your article about loot? Like
that was a guy called Nathan Lawrence.
That was Nathan. Yeah. Anyway, it was a cool like online cross promotion of like, there was this cool article just about like the psychology of like why people love games with loot and what developers are doing to kind of like make that really super engrossing experience. But I remember there was an intro that was like. It was referencing what's the name of that Australian
bird? A bowerbird.
A bowerbird, and I googled it, and it was like I was interested. I'm like, this is like whatever. Like I've had conversations with plenty of people from Australia. It's like we're speaking the same language, and it's immediately just like encountering some fauna that I'm just like, I don't know.
We found it
immediately turned to Google. It's a bird. It's a bird that collects like shiny baubles.
We were really amused that you guys put a little editor's note explaining that at the start. We were very
sorry. We don't know what these weirdos are talking about either.
It was fun. It's a good article. People should check it out. I think it's still applicable, but it was just a fun Australian culture thing. But I mean, I worked in an Outback Steakhouse for about 9 years, so I
I
get
think that
it.
counts for anything.
It's the same deal. Like, yeah, Kookaburra chicken wings,
Yeah.
Aussie-tizers. I get it.
Aussie-tizers? Is that a thing?
Yeah, 100%. That's appetizers.
I worked that one out.
It's Australian for appetizers. Additionally, big blokes are the giant. Oh my gosh! So at the Outback, they had
this is
bathrooms.
cringeworthy.
Bathrooms were blokes. Ladies' room was Sheila's.
I knew it
and
was-
and 90% of the time, people would be like, "Which one's which?" I'm like, "Well, one has she in the title. Like, let's work this through together." Not to speak too broadly about Outback clientele, but
That's the same. That's all about
Wallaby Darns were a delicious drink. Grilled shrimp on the Barbie was an element. It's very cringy.
What is the primo Australian delicacy? Forget the Americanized nonsense. Like, what would you actually recommend to people to check out? And
God, you've put me on the
suggest one.
spot here.
Yeah.
Meat pies. You guys don't do meat pies.
like a
It's a
shepherd's
British
pie
thing,
kind of
man.
thing? Like
but without the potato.
No, I've seen Sweeney
so
Todd.
just
I know
pure
what meat pies
just pure
are.
meat.
No, I'm not falling for that.
Okay, so Australian game dev. We got Team Bondi.
We're not sure anymore.
No one knows what's happening to those
happened
folks.
Team Bondi.
You have Wonderful Half Brick.
We do. We've got the condensed version of that story is we had a lot of guys making AA games in the early 2000s.
Yeah.
You had your GFC, the Australian dollar hit parity. All of a sudden, it was no longer cheap to license out these guys who were making games for THQ, EA,
Sega.
Yeah.
Was it the Castle of
Castle of Illusion.
Yeah, the remake, right? Yeah.
Oh, really?
2K.
Sega.
I mean, parts of Bioshock were made there. All those studios collapsed in about 2 years, around 2008, 2009.
Oh, wow.
Decimated the industry. And then over the next couple of years, you've had a lot of talented people without work just making their own studios. And now there's a really interesting indie scene there. We've got, Crossy Road was huge.
Yeah.
That's one of ours. The guys making Hand of Fate, Defiant Dev, they're a great team. I think you guys might have reviewed that one.
I think we did. That's a
Yeah.
Dantec joint. We don't know what goes on back there in the office.
Yeah, no, there's some interesting stuff now. The story is basically death and resurgence in a new form. So,
Yeah. Oh, wild. What has been the standout moment from E3 for you? What's the most impressive game you've seen?
I was really into Shadow of Mordor. Or
No one
never remember
can
what that
say
game's
it.
called.
Yeah.
That was. I spent about an hour and a half actually playing that game. A lot of the demos at E3 are 15 minutes. I got to actually play this game and work out what it feels like, and it's basically exactly what I want from a sequel to that game.
So I really loved Shadow of Mordor,
Okay.
and I also saw like a lot of potential in what it could become. How does I feel like there's just a lot to unpack with like the sort of siege element. Is that what you checked out? Like what element?
Yeah, I did a siege, and so basically the old Nemesis screen is there, except instead of just some random hierarchy, there's a castle behind it, and the more powerful generals end up in higher tiers in the castle,
Okay.
and you got to work your way up to the overlord of the castle. And this is probably too obscure a reference to be relevant.
Is it a bird?
It's a bowerbird. The Australian bird, the bowerbird.
Yeah, I'm familiar.
Did you ever play Viking Battle for Asgard, the Creative Assembly?
Wait, no, I didn't play that. I played Rune Viking Warlord, but this was a 360 game, right?
Yeah, this
It
was a
that
360
era.
game.
I did not play that.
Lots of units on screen, storming a castle, and you had 3 or 4 capture points before you get to the final point. And that's basically what you're doing in Mordor. It feels like the Battle of Helm's Deep. I think that's what they're going for every time.
So are you directing so there's like a zoomed out layer, right, where
There
it's
is.
like you direct the troops, you plan the battle, and then
weird.
you're also Talion on the field, right? Like
yeah, so the strategic element sort of comes into before you launch the battle. You see what defenses they have, and they've still got their weaknesses. This guy's terrified of fire. This guy doesn't like getting stabbed in the head. And you match that up with a general with a corresponding area, and you send this guy to this guy, this guy to this guy.
All right.
You can call in archers, and so there is a little strategic element. I think ultimately it probably doesn't matter too much. If
Sure.
you're really good at the game, I'm sure it won't matter.
So
It's
do you just
interesting.
plan once at the beginning of the battle, and then it's
Yes.
just hope for the best, and you trudge through and like decapitate as many Uruks as you can?
Capture a few points. In the background, they're still fighting. You will occasionally flash away to them when they've killed one of the big generals
Okay.
or one of them's died.
So once the action starts, there's no zooming back out. Stop. Let's see how it's going.
No.
Replan. Okay,
Set and forget.
I like the commit layer of that because it's like actually like planning like a battle. It's just like, hope this works.
Like a little bit of like Mass Effect 2 suicide, run sequence just right at the end there.
Good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or even like it's interesting because I think like the creative director, the game director for that game, I think he came from like an RTS background, so it's interesting to hear that it might be adapting some of those more strategic layers, like they worked on like Endwar and stuff like that. I'm pretty sure. Yeah. So that's your game of the show at this point.
I mean, I've still got to go to Ubisoft tomorrow. There's still a lot I haven't played, but yeah, that's the one that's really sticking with me. And when you complete the siege, you take over it, you put your generals there, and that changes how the castle looks aesthetically.
Oh, that's
all these
nice.
orcs have different tribes. I can't remember what they were called. There were a certain tribe that was really into industry, a certain tribe that's really into poison for some reason. And just sort of affects.
Orcs.
Yeah, they're orcs. I
We're
don't know.
planting our flag into poison.
Are they still called Uruks or are they orcs now? Like,
I didn't pick up on that.
hey,
Ignorance.
Dave. Like,
Sorry, man.
if you're
Yeah.
gonna, it's okay. I'll look into it.
Hey, Dave, you also saw Spider-Man, right?
I did, and you saw Spider-Man 2, right?
I did. Yeah, I was. So going into the Sony appointments that I saw today, a lot of people were saying like, it's basically the same as press conferences, and I found them to be pretty different. Uncharted, especially, which we'll talk about in a little bit, Joe. But Spider-Man, it was basically what they showed at the press conference. It helps to have more context. But what did you take away from that?
Yeah, basically the exact same thing.
Yeah.
Everyone's talking about the QuickTime events, and I did ask them, what happens when you fail these things? Is it a fail state? Is it a restart? And the strangest thing was they were either dodging my question or they don't actually know, because they said, yeah, we've got a few ideas and we're not quite sure yet. I mean, that was their answer.
Well, maybe they were more rehearsed when we got in there, but they
Okay.
seemed very prepared for that question for my demo, whereas like someone asked about like, so are there fail states here? And they're like, look, the QuickTime thing, we know it's a discussion point, like, and they made it clear that this is a different sequence. They called it like, hey, this is just like a fraction of the overall Spider-Man experience. Like, it's still open world, still exploring the city plenty, where it's all of Manhattan. But I think it's just that classic E3, what they have to show thing, where it's like, yeah, there's going to be some more QuickTime events. But they seem very aware that people were concerned.
Yeah, they were on the
about-
defensive, definitely.
Yeah. But like other stuff that stood out to me from what they said, let's see. One thing, Spider-Man does not kill,
Okay.
which
Yeah,
I guess
there
I'm
was
not a
that
huge...
on top of the construction site, right? And it seemed like I wondered if that was a condition for failure, if someone accidentally, or if it would automatically, he'd always.
They said they'd
blink
contextualize it in some way. I don't know
I
if they-
saw a guy get punched off a building.
Yeah, but I
Really?
think like the Hobgoblin comes and picks him
Yeah.
up on his dumb little hover thing and carries him off to safety.
That's right.
Maybe there's some weird contextual thing like that, but I guess it makes sense. But I'm not a huge comic book Marvel guy. But I mean, when it comes to not killing, there's Batman, and I guess I never really put it together like, oh, I guess it's a huge thing that Spider-Man just never kills anybody, and so they took that very much to heart. Like, we want this to be a real Spider-Man experience. They also,
Give it 5 years, and then they'll reboot Super Dark and Gritty Spider.
oh, I can't wait, 2099.
Poison
When murder's
webs.
the only thing that makes me feel alive.
Yeah.
But then, like, asked about, like, okay, setting a game where you recreate all of Manhattan within the Marvel universe, like, where do you draw the line? Because it gets bizarre because Square Enix and Crystal Dynamics are also making a Marvel game. And so how much do they step on that? Like, you have to put Stark Tower in there. You have to have some weird, even if it's just, the geography, there has to be nods to an expanded Marvel universe. And their answer was, this is very much a Spider-Man story, but we definitely allude to the fact that it exists within a larger Marvel universe. But like, don't expect the Hulk to come in at the end for a tease or anything like
yeah,
that.
it got me thinking. I was trying to figure out how connected it is because, like, yeah, like the Fisk thing, like,
Yeah, it's Daredevil, right?
right, it's Daredevil.
Well,
and,
at
like,
least
he's
as we know it now
he's
from
in
the show,
jail
yeah.
and stuff. I'm just like trying to like piece it all together, and it's a lot to unpack to figure out like what's actually connected and canonically connected and not.
Yeah. Also, they were key in our presentation for saying, like, Brian Intihar, the creative director at Insomniac, he talked a lot about like lessons from Sunset Overdrive, which is interesting. But it seemed like up there with Spider-Man Does Not Kill, a huge thing for them is like, look, we know webs will attach to buildings. No matter what, it will always connect to buildings. We're never going to BS this thing. At all points, you'll see exactly where it goes. And then someone asked naturally, like, well, how does it work if you're like above a skyscraper? There's no skyscrapers around. They're like, the webs will always attach to something. So I don't know if that means there's going to be just cranes
Birds?
everywhere. Oh,
Convenient
birds.
birds,
Brilliant. Just onto the sun to get a quick lap around Manhattan.
Take that, Bobble Bird.
Bowerbird.
Yeah.
Right? Bowerbird?
You got it?
Yeah.
Awesome. Hey, Dave, you want to pass down that beer over at the table there? The non-opened one, preferably.
There you go.
Hey, thank you. So that's what I took away. Are you excited for that game? You a big Spider-Man fan?
Yeah, I am. I do wonder. I feel like what they showed at the press conference kind of diminished a little bit of my excitement, if anything.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm not sure I could articulate that elegantly, but I just want to see you running around the open world. I want to
Totally.
see the webbing birds thing swimming around.
That was the thing I was most excited to see. Like when Spider-Man kicked open, or like kicked on, and then the you realize, oh, it's Insomniac, it's open world. I want to know how open it was immediately, and I was like very relieved and excited to see him swinging around again.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of QuickTime events, Joe Juba, you saw Detroit Become Human.
Yeah, that's true. I really did.
I walked by that game and said, man, this looks a lot better than I thought it would. Those faces are amazing.
It's
and
true.
then pop on the screen, hit triangle or circle to determine this outcome. Is that the game?
I think, man, so not Heavy Rain, Quantic Dream games sort of exist in a weird spot now because, like, when games like Indigo Prophecy came out, there weren't so many games that were so unapologetically narrative forward, right?
Yeah.
Like this is just a story game.
Right.
So I think we've gotten to a point now, though, where there are a lot more of those kinds of things. So stuff like you mentioned, the sort of like very discrete choices and things like holding R2 and L2 and R1 to like push something or pull something might feel a little
Laughable?
I'm
I'm going to go with laughable.
Yeah, let's go with laughable.
Laughable, to me, it doesn't do it. So like here's what I think is important about the way Quantic Dream handles these sorts of things, and that's like in other games where you consider them as like quick time events, there's always this sense of like urgency, right? It's like,
Yeah.
gotta hit square, gotta hit X, gotta hit X, 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 X. And there are a few parts in this where you are expected to like repeatedly press a button. But for the most part, the button presses aren't like a test of your skills. They're not meant to be like something of stress. They're just meant to be a thing that like connects you in a sort of, what's the word I'm looking for?
Tangible?
Yeah, not tangible. Like when you can feel something.
Tactile?
Yeah,
Ooh,
yeah,
there we go.
yeah, exactly.
I used to be a writer.
Me too, apparently. Yeah, so it provides you a sort of tactile connection to the action on screen rather than something that is supposed to feel like gamey.
Yeah. So visually amazing. I mean, were you interested in the storytelling?
Yeah, and I always am. To me, all of Quantic Dream's games have like a super interesting premise. I've always been like 100% sold on them before they've come out. Right?
Dealing with the afterlife so heavily in a game with Beyond Two Souls is a super interesting premise that few games have really tackled.
Yeah.
So if you are zoomed out as possible, that is a fascinating game. And also on the microscopic level, it's a fascinating game, but maybe for different reasons. Yeah.
But so like I think Heavy Rain is the only game of theirs that's come out, and I actually like was very satisfied with the outcome.
Yeah.
I
Okay.
really enjoyed Heavy Rain. That was like a one day like just binge. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it lends itself so well to that. But like Indigo Prophecy, the last third of that game just like goes bananas and off the rails in a way.
Is it
that-
aliens or internet?
Yeah, it's like some weird cult from the internet has something to do
Oh,
with
that
it.
sounds
and
rad.
like Beyond Two Souls again, the sort of like the final scenes and moments in that to me did not serve as like the sort of culmination of that game that I was hoping.
It's weird. I hear of a new Quantic Dream game, and I see like Detroit, and what I get most excited from it is like the way that they capture like the mundanity of like well, this isn't actually mundane, but Indigo Prophecy's like, hey, there's a cop at the door, you need to hide all the compromising stuff, what do you do first? Or Beyond Two Souls, the date, like getting ready for the date, and you're just
Probably the highlight of that whole game.
Yeah, I agree.
and I hope that there's those moments in Detroit as well, because I really think they're special.
Good.
Yeah.
Joe, do you think this will win over David Cage Skeptics?
No, probably not. I mean, I guess I guess it depends on what you mean by David Cage Skeptics. If you've played previous Quantic Dream games and have felt extremely burned and disappointed by them, I don't think this is going to convert you. If you've sort of been hearing things about these games up until now, I mean, like, I don't know how it's going to pan out, but like, there are a few things about this that I think are smart. One is the fact that they are limiting the scope of playable characters to it. So, unlike Heavy Rain, which I think had, was it 5 characters? 4 or 5. This one you have 3 main playable characters. They're all androids. It's sort of got this angle of like we are looking at this struggle from a purely like synthetic humanoid point of view, which I mean I think that's a cool premise. You've got androids in sort of like different places, positioned differently within that conflict, and I think that that's interesting. What I worry about is that the potential for, I would say, maybe a sort of ham-handed handling of the whole thing is kind of high. Like
he feels like, not to put down David Cage, he might feel like he's the first person to ever think about, hey,
and not
what
even,
if androids? It was kind of like a civil rights issue.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, to be non-specific about it, you can remove David Cage from the equation entirely, and if you just give someone the setup of like, this is like, it's like racism but with robots,
right?
There is a potential to grossly mishandle that in a way that just feels sort of like obvious and insulting. Nothing I've seen of the game so far tells me that that's what it's going to be, but like from what I've seen, that's kind of my reservation, given the way that like a core premise has seemed very interesting, but then sort of unraveled later in some other games of theirs. So
hey Tim.
Oh, hi.
Mega Man Legacy Collection 2, is that mainly what you're repping here?
Yeah.
So you went from Resident Evil 7, Resident Evil 7's DLC, and then it's like, hey, you're covering Mega Man Legacy Collection 2. Is that a fun transition? Do you like replay all those Mega Man games to make sure you're ready to go?
Is that a demotion?
Yes and yes. All right. Hey, so why it's not? So I'm like for the U.S., like leading the marketing plan, like from the bottom up. So from a personal level, like it does mean a lot. Like I came in like midstream for the marketing side for RE7. It was there for announcing stuff, but like the plans were underway. So it's been really fun as a like RE7. Like I loved it. I played it like 5 times after it came out and like platinumed it, and like I was all about it, and that was super exciting. But it was also cool to be like, oh, holy hell, like, this is a colorful, cute game with, like, the like, it was just a real, like, good, fresh, a breath of fresh air as far as just, like, tonally. It's a happier world to be in sometimes. Yeah, you need a little bit. You need to come up for air every now and again.
Well, I remember...
But I have replayed it all of them, yeah.
Oh, good. I remember with Legacy Collection 1, you did some press. I think you went over to, like, Nintendo.
Yeah,
didn't you, and played it?
My first week, I went over there with Frank Cifaldi.
Friend of the show.
Yeah, friend of the show, and who I was, like, reaching out to, and it was just, like, if people don't know, like, Frank Cifaldi worked on Legacy Collection 1. He's also, like, a big-time, like, video game archivist and really cares about preservation of game history. It was something that I cared about and wrote about sometimes at Game Informer, but, like, there was this thing that's, like, this genius solution where it's, like, put him in Game Informer, and it's just, like, I don't know what the analogy should be, but it's just like this robot built just to do this one thing, and like putting him in like the place where it's just like do the thing, and he's just like going. And I can't wait to see what he digs up. But regardless, I did that was a detour. I did a Nintendo Minute with him on Legacy Collection 1, and that was fun.
So kind of primed the pumps a little bit.
Yeah,
that
was
Trump's phrase. Yeah,
exactly. And I played all of the Legacy Collection 1, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then on the road to announce for Legacy Collection 2, I replayed all of them, and I'm up to 10 right now, and like it was a really good kind of reunion.
All right, Hotshot, rank them 1 through 10.
Rank 1
Let's
through
go.
10? So personal list, it's Mega Man 2, Mega Man 9.
As the second best?
100%.
That's a bold claim, sir.
It is such a tight experience. So Mega Man 9 feels very much like it is trying to evoke what Mega Man 2 was going for in pacing, in the way that the robot masters kind of play off of each other. I don't know. 9 is a personal favorite. The soundtrack's fantastic. And then from there, I'd say probably like just at the top of my head, I'll just do like 5. Personal is like 2, 9, 3, 7, 3, 7, then maybe 1, and then
I think that was 5.
Yeah.
You're making
No,
a good.
that's fine.
You're
Anyway,
making a good case for Mega Man Collection 1 here, Tim.
Take it as a whole. I said personal list. I also recommend picking up Legacy Collection 1. But 2, so why I'm so close to Legacy Collection 2, or why I think it's a cool thing, is so Legacy Collection 1 was like, the 8-bit classics, right? Like 1 through 6.
Yeah.
What's cool about 2 to me is that it showcases like 7 and 8 showcase like the evolution of the franchise, just kind of like figuring out what this kind of like side-scrolling action game was going to be in the 16-bit and 32-bit era.
Right.
And then there's the classic series holds a beat, and then it really reemerges as 9 as like an 8-bit like retro like throwback. And so it's this cool like kind of revolution to it, but it's cool. And there's the stuff from Legacy Collection 1, like the extra challenges, the remix stages, the museum mode, and there's all the DLC from like 9 and 10. Like there's some
I
cool
didn't know they
stuff.
made that.
Yeah, you could play as Proto Man in Mega Man 9. You could like charge and slide and stuff, and there was like an extra stage. And then 10 did this super deep cut thing for fans, which was like 3 extra stages where you fought the Mega Man killer robots that were from the Game Boy games, like the original portable games.
Cool.
It's like super. It's like Anchor, Ballad, and Punk are like the Mega Man killers.
Good names.
Yeah, pretty cool. and you can also play as Bass.
Oh, cool.
So yeah,
Where in your ranking does Mega Man Cross Street Fighter fall? The game that I feel like no one has talked about since it came out, but it was such a bizarre concept. Dave, do you remember this?
Not at all.
It was a fan project that Capcom officially sanctioned.
it's Street Fighter Cross Mega Man.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did I
Yeah,
reverse
it's-
that?
Yeah.
Oh,
it's-
okay.
It's cool.
Okay,
It came out for
Street
the
Fighter-
25th anniversary.
Okay.
But yeah, no, I actually reviewed it.
Yeah, you
I
did.
I
That's
thought
such
it
a
was super. I thought it was super well done.
Yeah.
It's like
Is it a fighting?
no. It's like basically it's like Mega Man going through. Like, hey, here is like the Ryu stage. Here is the Dalsim stage.
So
and
the
it's a
8
fire
World
stage.
Warriors are like the 8 robot masters.
Yeah,
basically.
100%. And then like you have this cool thing where it's just like, oh well, you can use
Holy crap.
a Hadouken. And
I'm just now realizing how Capcom totally just recycled the Mega Man concept for Street Fighter. Like 8 bosses, or like 8 people to fight through, and then 4 bosses.
Wait, all these video games are about violence. Well, I'll be.
I'm just saying, it's very similar.
and then there's
structure.
rock paper scissors elements too. Like obviously there's that cool thing where it's like Street Fighter has rock paper scissors with like block, attack, and throw, and then Mega Man has the weaknesses and the vulnerabilities of bosses. It was a really fun thing.
Attach
The
the throw
soundtrack
gun.
was really good too.
Is that still available to download?
I think you can find it.
Okay.
I'm gonna play that.
Yeah, it's on PC.
And I
It
mean,
was
I know
free.
you were at Game Forum at the time, but it was a thing where like Capcom said, "Hey, this fan project's so well made. Good on ya."
Yeah, it was like officially endorsed, and
That's
they
crazy.
helped out the indie devs.
Gave it an 8.
Yeah,
Yeah, Tim Jury, 8 out of 10.
I liked
Recommended.
it.
work,
It was,
Cyril.
it was cool. But anyway, it's fun to be working on Mega Man Legacy Collection 2,
Yeah.
and it's it's been a fun ride.
Hey, Tim, can you... I have a Mega Man question.
Oh yeah.
I tried playing Mega Man 2, the Quick Man stage.
Ooh.
And those lasers, man, really were doing a number on me. Is there any... so here's my basic question. Am I just so old and terrible now
Yes.
that I'm just never going to be able to finish that again? Or do I have any sort of legitimate grievance on like HD TVs versus CRTs, response time, that kind of
How are
thing?
you playing?
How
it?
much time do you have here?
How are you?
Joe?
How are you playing it?
PS4 on an
So
LCD?
Legacy Collection 1.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
okay, gotcha. Yeah, like input lag shouldn't be part of that equation at all.
What about
generally.
internal input lag with his old man dumb brain?
Oh, sure, yeah. I mean, so 1 beer is the sweet spot. Gives you liquid courage. No, my first instinct is to tell you to just get good. The second instinct is like Flashman freezes those. If you use Flashman's ability, it will freeze
I'm not
those
doing that.
lasers.
I'm doing it the real way.
You're gonna do it the real way.
What's the
sure.
real way? What does that mean?
It means just like memorizing where the beams come in so that you can avoid it.
So
'Cause they're
don't
all-
cheat with boss powers.
I mean,
That's the idea.
here's the thing. I try to save Flashman's ability because I want to use it on Quickman because it cuts down half of his life bar.
Yeah.
But I think you just got to stick with it, man. Like Section 1, like save the game.
You're the ultimate Mega Man boss. Stick with it, man.
Save the game. No, that is like honestly like the credo is like motivation. Like you can
Yeah.
do it. Next time you'll do it. But like just save right before it and then like memorize that part and then go. But
So it's you, it's not the TV, is what he's saying.
Yeah.
You
I
can-
got it.
you
No,
can
that's
do
cool.
it.
That's cool.
Well, hey, speaking of throwback experiences, Joe, I cut you off. I grabbed your lips and sealed them shut when you tried telling me about Metal Gear Survive earlier.
That's
'Cause
true.
I'm so curious
Oh,
to
we
hear
checked
you.
it out?
Joe played it.
I played some Metal
I
Gear
want to
Survive
know what you
today.
think of it.
So here, all right,
Getting comfortable.
yeah. Well, so what's interesting about this is that I was like, I think as much as anyone was super skeptical about just like why this game even exists.
To the point where you could have hit a button and said, cancel this game.
Yeah.
If it was your call.
Yep.
Okay.
But I still can't answer that question. Like, I'm not totally sure who the audience is. Like, I don't know that like super hardcore Metal Gear fans are going to love it.
Yeah.
And as someone who's like, I'm not personally really invested in the like multiplayer horde mode, you know, like or cooperative, like those kinds of like survival multiplayer experiences. But with all of that being said, it is
Yeah.
built on the foundation of like Metal Gear Solid 5. Not only graphically, but like control wise. So we got in there and we played a match of like, I mean, what's effectively sort of like a defense mode where it's like you have a base.
Yep.
And you have a bunch of different tools. In between waves, you go up and you like set up barriers and you can
So it's
between
Gears of War.
yeah, so in between missions, you can go do like side quests to go get like different bonuses. It's like, oh, I can go get ammo and bring it back to the
It's
group.
Fortnite.
Or I can go out there and get those. I forget what they're called. Those like those little mini mechs that you can get in MGS5.
Oh, yeah.
You can like go. We did a little side mission, which is like you go out to a marker, you get those. Like you and a buddy can go get those and bring them back. So then for the next wave, you're in these little like robots with machine guns and stuff. So
Is there a timer? Like, how much can you scavenge before the next wave starts?
I think so.
Okay.
Because it's not. I mean, it's not about scavenging. I think it's more about like you do the objective, or like side mission, or you don't. But then you spend what time you have, sort of like refortifying
Prepping.
any defenses and stuff.
Okay.
Yeah, so like prepping.
Joe, I'm bracing for
But-
you saying that it's kind of cool.
Well, so here's the like. I had fun with it.
There we go.
I had fun with it, and it controls well.
Because it's Metal Gear Solid
Because
5.
it's the Metal Gear Solid 5 controls.
Yeah.
So like to that point, I guess you could say I'm sold on it. You know,
How
and that,
long
and that
was
like
your-
I would not hit the cancel button on this game right now. It's like no,
Your
that-
hand was slamming down, then you played it, and now it's hovering right above it.
Sweat drips down the nose.
Well, how long was your
but- yeah.
session?
What's that?
How long was your?
It was a 20-minute match. So it was like 20 minutes, 3 waves.
Did you get the suspicion that maybe there's not quite a long-term depth there? I mean, having fun in 20 minutes is different to having fun over 8 hours.
And exactly, and I cannot pretend to like project that experience out into the sort of like long term. I feel the same way about Skull and Bones at Ubisoft. You know, where it's like I played that for about 20 minutes and had a really good time with it. But it's like, does it have legs? Does it have the progression to keep you like coming back?
Sea legs.
I tried so hard to get that into my preview of that.
Oh man.
I couldn't make it work. But anyway, so yeah, so like that I don't know. But E3, I mean, partially you can't predict how that's going to go. You're not going to know until you play those games for 8 hours. And like, so again, my optimism extends to the point of I played this game for 20 minutes,
Totally.
had fun with it. I don't know everything about it, but I do know that I thought it was a multiplayer only game.
Yeah.
And it's not.
They
really?
said something like, I think the quote that I read was, it's going to be substantial single player. There's something confusing like that.
Yeah. So what they were not focusing on that today. But what they told us was something that hinted at a very traditional survival game kind of experience where it's like, okay, in the solo game, it's like it's you in this strange environment. You have like limited health, limited thirst and hunger or environment. I don't remember all of the things, but it's like it made it sound almost a little. And there's like crafting and stuff. You build like you need to establish a home base is one of the things. So it's like
Weird.
so it has a sense of maybe it being a little like Don't Starvey or
Did you
some
s-
hardcore survival?
Did you
Yeah.
see like a cutscene for this or
no,
anything?
no.
Okay.
It was just like a single. It was just like a single screen that said, these are features that will be in single player. Now, here's 20 minutes of multiplayer.
I was I was a tremendous Metal Gear Solid 5 fan. Like I felt madly in love with it.
Yeah.
And I was optimistic about this. Is there any sort of like? But one thing I loved about Metal Gear Solid was like there's like a meta progression to it that carries over. Like, is there beyond this wave stuff? Does it seem like there's like a lot of progression to it?
Again, like they didn't get us. We did not get a great sense for that.
Okay.
Were you in a group discussion where anybody, I don't think you would do this, but would anybody raise their hand and say, like, is this carrying on Kojima's legacy? Was there any whiff of Kojima's lasting impact? Anybody saying, look, we're carrying forward his vision, or just not saying his name at all? Was there any shadow of Kojima here?
Apart from just references to, like, I mean, the answer is no.
It doesn't start the mission and say, not a Hideo Kojima game every single time.
I mean, the point that, like, they reference the past games, but, like, even, like, they would say, hey, this uses the Phantom Pain's controls.
Yeah.
But they weren't, like, they just didn't dive into it. And, like, man, just given the stuff that I've seen in the news, floating around online about, like, how contentious that continues to be.
Right.
That, I mean, that doesn't surprise me. And
For sure.
I didn't ask.
Hey, real quick, Joe. God of War.
Yeah.
No gameplay demo at the
Correct.
show, which is odd. Maybe they're saving it for PSX before release. Who knows? But you spoke to the director. Is there anything you learned about God of War that especially had an impact on you?
Yeah. I would say a couple big takeaway points from that. One of the things that I was worried about with the game was the idea that, like, it would be carrying so much baggage from the previous games along with it.
Yeah.
So I asked about, like, okay, so, like, everyone at this point knows what happened to Kratos' original family. He has a new family now. Like, how does that fold into it? And what Cory Barlog had said, the director, is that, like, it's a thing that's generally left unsaid in the game. Like, it's not something that they spend time on, but it's something that, as a player, will definitely, like, if you know what's going on there, will definitely color your view of his, like, motivations.
It's like a
and stuff
pregnant
that.
pause,
Yeah.
when he's talking about the power of his child or something.
Yeah.
Like, okay.
The other thing, I would say, like, big takeaway from it was the idea that, like, I know coming out of last year there was speculation like, oh, it's open world God of War.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, and it's not. He explicitly is like, we are not an open world game.
Good.
We're an action adventure game. The word he used to describe it, I actually really liked. He called it not open world, but super wide linear.
That's a Naughty Dog thing.
Oh, yeah?
I feel like they're the pioneers of calling with Uncharted 4 it a wide linear experience. I wonder if that's just in the Sony family now.
Yeah, that could be.
That's a good way to put it.
Anyway, so those were, I would say, probably some of the biggest points about it.
Did you leave more optimistic? Anything like that?
Oh yeah,
Oh, good.
for sure. I mean, we haven't the big unknown about that game right now. I still think is combat, because, like, so much of that series' identity is wrapped up in those, like, whirling chain blades, right?
Yeah.
And, like, those are starting to he doesn't have those anymore.
Yeah.
So there's more to see with that, but we just didn't get to see it at E3.
What I really love. Oh, go ahead, Dave.
I was going to say, what about the switch to the Norse mythology? Did you guys touch on that?
Yeah.
Are they going to bother explaining that, or just like...
Yeah. So here, I don't know if it's like, if Kratos did, like, dimension hopping and stuff. They're sort of dodging story specifics of what went on. But the general takeaway, so I asked, like, what happens between God of War 3 and this game? Like, how does he get here? And the idea is that, like, after God of War 3, Kratos is essentially just sort of, like, wanders around for a few years. There's the idea that, like,
Go snowboarding.
well, the idea
He's
that,
looking desperately for something else to kill. He's running out of anything else.
well, it's you joke.
Yeah,
but
I do.
That's not it. It's more like he comes to the realization that everything in his life has sort of turned to ash, right? And it sort of becomes a little, like, quiet about that, or somber, or like needs to focus a little bit, rather than just, like, always scream and kill.
That is not this Kratos.
Yeah, it's definitely not. So the idea is that Greece sort of had too much emotional baggage for him, and he just needed to get away from it. So he wanders for a few years, sort of in that, like, trying to maybe escape the person he was, sort of
Right.
thing. And then there's this fuzzy period of, like, apparently he meets a woman and has a kid and
Grows a beard.
and now he and his son are on some journey of unspecified importance.
Right.
Didn't they say something about like there's in the trailer? I didn't rewatch it. But there's something like you need to go meet your mother. Isn't there
I spoke to
something about
someone, I can't remember who it was, but on this game, and he was saying that basically Kratos was worried that his kid was going to grow up to be a bad god or a bad demigod like Kratos is. So this is setting him up to be better than he is, basically.
But he also, but at the same time in that trailer, it seemed like he was training him to be a killer. Whereas like he said in the trailer, you have to close your heart to the suffering of the things that you're killing. So it
Well,
seemed like he's doing the opposite.
Interesting.
Right?
It's. I mean, like at a
I
certain
don't
point,
think
you
it-
have to kill a deer to survive, but like you need to be able to survive, and it's a harsh world.
Yeah,
But-
you got to kill that friendly snake in that trailer. You got to
Yeah,
take that
yeah.
MF down.
You know, Ben, like we took the same Scandinavian literature class in college.
Before we knew each other, we probably
Before.
sat right next to each other.
Yeah, we also
What?
went to a Metalocalypse, like a Death Clock concert
Right.
that we
We
didn't know.
skipped class the same night, Scandinavian mythology, to go to Metalocalypse class. It was basically a
Class,
class
yeah,
in
yeah.
metal,
Yeah.
and yet did not ever
didn't-
talk to each other or make each
we
other's
had like
lives
this
better.
double
in any way.
helix of our interests just like curving over.
Wow.
But the reason I bring it up is because like so we studied like Norse mythology for a while. I remember hearing about like a world serpent.
Yeah.
I know the ice giants and stuff, but like when I take my vision of like what I love about Norse mythology and what I know about and I love about God of War, my initial thought when we dreamed about this reality where he'd go invade another pantheon was like Kratos yelling at Odin as Odin's on a mountain yelling back
Yeah.
at him. It's this larger than life thing. Obviously, there's this thing where like maybe you can't tell that kind of story while trying to also have this grounded kind of emotional weight to it. But like my what I'm driving at is like what as a Norse mythology nerd, like what are
Yeah.
you pulling out of these trailers and stuff, and what are you excited about, and what are you seeing that you like?
God, it was unclear in the trailer if one of the wolves was talking.
Oh.
But it led the idea of
Like
like
a
a Fenrir.
Fenrir?
Yeah, like getting up in there. Also, just I love the
As he's known to do,
Get that Fenrir right
getting
up
all
there.
up in those
Yeah.
hands.
You read Sven Skarsgård. He's constantly talking about those wolves getting up in that ass. But anyways, I really love the idea of the wandering and the getting there. Like in the trailer, again, they said there's a line there where it's like, you're a long way from home, man. Like I like the idea
Yeah.
of mythologies acknowledging another mythology's existence and being like, yeah, we know you worship those weirdos on the mountains of Mount Olympus over there, but like this is not your territory. And so I love the idea of everything existing in one world. It's very Age of Mythology. Just for another nerdy reference.
You know, it would be a really slam dunk crossover if it happened. Like somehow get Kratos into Smite. Like, just have him, like again, like bull in a china shop, just like whoa.
Gotta take out this one with the Donkey Kong skin, all that nonsense that is it's Smite at this
total
point.
aside. Yeah.
Hey, speaking of worshiping gods, how about we take a little trip down to India? Uncharted Lost Legacy.
Yeah.
So the demo they showed, it was a 15-minute, 10-minute gameplay sequence that was different from what we saw on the cover story trip, which was interesting. Joe, you saw this thing?
Yeah. So my big takeaway.
Yeah.
Wait, Dave, did you see this also?
I'm seeing that tomorrow.
Oh, great.
Okay. Well, I don't want to spoil too much about it for you then. But
Go for it.
well,
I don't know if there's that much to spoil, really.
I guess what strikes me the most about Uncharted is at first glance you're like, yeah, I've played this game. It's Uncharted 4. You know, it's like it's Chloe, it's Nadine, but it's similar mechanics. They've got the rope.
It's really wild.
the
Like, there's
rope
literally a
thing.
sequence where Chloe is like sliding down something, then uses the rope to grapple, and then is flying through the air and does that sweet Nathan Drake air punch. Like, awesome stuff. Naughty Dog, amazing. But I've seen that a lot because
Yep.
I've played a lot of Uncharted 4.
But I do want to add a but to that. So
Yeah.
it's like
Well,
my-
that's where Chloe comes in. Hey,
Wah, wah. So my first instinct is like, okay, so what makes this new? What makes this special?
Yeah.
Until you sort of realize, like, I guess I have to admit that from my time seeing the game, from like talking to the people there, there's no big like banner feature that's like, okay, well, you've played Uncharted 4, but this is really going to change the, it's like, it's smaller and more emotional shifts in terms of like the interaction between, like, Nate and Sully basically always have each other's backs.
Yeah.
But Nadine and Chloe don't, and there's some points in that relationship where their interactions are going to be different. So, but like, that's not a bit like that is a small thing that you notice throughout the course of a whole game. It's not like something that demos super well,
Right.
But my big ultimate thing that I take away from it is like I loved Uncharted 4.
Right.
I will play more of a game that feels like Uncharted 4.
Different characters that are kind of like secondary to the main story, and if you can have a connection with these characters via Lost Legacy, and then at some point replay like older Uncharted's and have this more like this firmer appreciation. I think I'm really excited about it. There's two things, like the whole like it's $40, isn't it? Like
Yes.
yeah, like that model is a new thing
Love it.
that Sony is like really embracing, like with Crash. I think Crash is all. I know it's a trilogy of games and stuff,
Yeah.
but I think it's.
I agree. It should be like hundreds of dollars.
Ratchet and Clank was also
Yeah.
$40.
But even Microsoft, like Recore, like it seems like
No, that's,
all
that's
the-
a great
all the
point.
big
But
three.
I think there's this space. Like people talked for years and years about like it's either like an indie game or it's like a big $60 title. And
Yeah.
I love that there's this space that's being filled, and on top of it just being like an enticing price point and continuing the story. I love it's like it's going to be shorter. It's not going to be as long as your classic Uncharted game, from what I've read about it. And there's something enticing about that to me, because it's like I want dessert from Uncharted 4. I don't necessarily want to play Uncharted 4 again right now, even though I love the game.
but it's just a boiled down
When-
new experience.
Just the distillation
totally.
of it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
that's
it
what
seems
I'm
like
excited about.
Yeah, it seems like that's very much what it is. The big takeaway here, something they were very tight-lipped about at the studio during the cover story trip, was the big villain. And so it's interesting to actually see that performance, and I think it was really great. Like, Rafe in Uncharted 4 was one of the highlights for me. He was
Really
kind of
good.
Steve Buscemi, but an awesome villain, Steve Buscemi, that I was really into. And this guy, he eventually gets to a point where he's also just really soft-spoken, just explaining, like, I think he goes on and says something about how there's blood flowing through these caverns, stuff like that. But just like cool, subtle villains. Maybe it's just him coming off the heels of Mass Effect Andromeda, where Archon was just the dumbest villain I've seen in a game in a long time. So anything will look good. But he really popped. I think he's a really interesting character from what I've seen in that demo so far.
Yeah. I mean, the sort of quiet intellectual is a very
Love it.
different. Like, well, it's got that. Just sort of like silent menace to it. That is.
Yeah.
That's really. I mean, if nothing else, a change of pace for Uncharted that has weird bald marine space fruit eating guy or whatever. So,
Yeah, absolutely.
How do you feel about Chloe as a protagonist? Can you do this series without Nate?
Totally.
Yeah?
I mean, she's going to be cracking wise. I think she's actually maybe even a more interesting character. This is influenced from the cover story trip much more than the short demo, maybe, Joe, but you're welcome to jump in. But just having a character that plays more in a gray space of, like, you don't know exactly where she's going. She could, be a dick to more characters. And Nathan Drake, he's really only a dick to Elena and the people he kills, I guess. You know what I mean? But it's more fun to have a character that's a little bit more in a Han Solo space, around New Hope. You know what I mean? It's a fun space to work in for a protagonist, I think.
Yeah.
But there wasn't that much personality on display outside of they demonstrated like the tension between Chloe and Nadine. There was a good moment where they're in the bushes about to take out two guys. And then Chloe's like, all right, you take the one on the left, I'll take the one on the right. And Dean's like, got it. And then Dean just runs out and takes out both of them immediately. And then Chloe's like, all right, I guess you got that. Moving on.
Yeah.
So they're definitely playing that up, and I think it works pretty well.
Yeah.
Anything else you guys definitely want to talk about before we move on to the second half of this podcast?
All I want to say is like Mario Odyssey. That's it.
Yeah.
That's
Have you
it.
played
You
it,
guys
Tim?
played it?
No, just
I'll play it.
I'm gonna. Yeah.
Yeah.
Is it as good as it looks?
See, I was left. Yeah, it is. I mean, it's Mario. It feels like you want it to
Yeah.
feel.
Dave,
It's-
I wish you just said it controls like garbage.
It is.
It looks good in
awful.
video, but
Look, see, I was actually left a little bit cold by the Nintendo presentation.
oh yeah,
It just wasn't. I don't know why. I can't articulate why. But Mario's a game you need to play, and
Yeah.
it just felt exactly like I wanted it to feel.
yeah. The environments maybe weren't as big as I was expecting. I'm still confused about the overall structure of like how many of these different areas are there going to be, but they were big. I actually talked to Miyamoto today, and even in that interview, he was big on focusing on they have a funky phrase where it's like a dense garden, basically, something like that. I'm sure there's a Japanese word that sounds much better, right? But it is true, like there is a lot going on in all those environments, a ton of little secrets that you can explore. And as cool as New Donk City is, I'm curious how many of those type of environments
Yeah.
there will be. But I mean, that latest trailer, I haven't seen any trailer breakdowns, but I'm sure that it's just bonkers with the amount that they showed. So there's a lot of variety in the game, and I think it's interesting in comparison to the early messaging, which is like, this is a throwback to Mario 64, throwback to Mario Sunshine. It's like, cool. I love Mario 64 because it's has variety, but it's relatively simple mechanics. And then the latest trailer and everything they're showing now is like, oh, this is mechanics up the yin yang. Holy God!
You go 2D, you throw hats.
Yeah, I mean,
Possess
like
people?
Link Between Worlds type stuff. in there.
yeah. I there's a part of me that worries maybe there's too many little gimmicks here. If you are just hoping for that pure Mario 64 experience again.
The Link Between Worlds thing felt really cool. That you go in a pipe in the wall, and it just they're short, contained bits. It was 20 seconds here and there. But so cool.
Seamlessly jump out the other side of it. It's just like, man, impressive.
So
impressive.
much fun. So much
very
fun for
cool.
sure.
I played the Mexico themed level, I guess.
Yeah.
That made me wonder about the structure because I got the first moon. I guess that's the stars, and
They
then
aren't shines. Yeah.
whatever they're calling them. But then it sort of opened up the next part of the level, and it sort of expanded forward. And I wonder if you need to do that in a linear progression.
I didn't get that sense. I got a lot of moons.
See, I didn't get that from the New York one, but from the Mexico one, I did.
I
so-
know in it's weird just call it when Mario goes to Mexico. I know I got other
Save it for the
moons other
sequel.
than following the main path. I was doing a bunch of weird stuff, and I got on a Jaxi and rode to a secret area, as the Nintendo rep told me. But it did not stop my progress in any way, so I don't think it is
Okay, cool.
gated moon to moon to moon in that way. But Joe, real quick, you said State of Decay 2 won you over, and you're going to like it more than the first game, and that's a done deal?
Okay. Yes, I started to turn all these into like yes buts. That's just sort of the way I do things. I actually really liked the first State of Decay,
But
but
you gave it a 7.
well, no. Conceptually, it's so cool, but for me, there was so much that like technically about that game that hamstrung the ambitions. Like
Yeah.
so much of the cool stuff they were trying to do was so hard to appreciate because of like technical issues that just got in the way.
Totally.
So in my mind, first and foremost, they need to fix that. You don't know if they fix that in a whole game in a like 15-minute demo.
Yeah.
But other things, it seems like they have a very good handle on how they could deepen the experience in terms of like making the community sort of more elements of the community to manage, get bonuses from, and stuff like that. Making
Totally.
the characters have more personality. Just all those kinds of things. Basically, it's like, man, I would have loved the first State of Decay if it was able to like fully execute on those concepts.
Right.
And it seems like they are, putting the time into figuring out why that didn't happen. And I hope they can do it. From what I saw, it looks like they've got the right idea.
Love
So,
it. I definitely can't wait
yeah.
to see more of that game. Our guests are here. We should probably wrap this
Yeah.
part up.
Let's do it.
So if you're watching the video version, tune in. There'll be a YouTube video that'll be the follow-up within the same shelf. It's on YouTube. You can find it otherwise. Day 2, it'll be labeled something fancy. If you're watching or if you're listening to the audio version, stay tuned because we got some great developers coming up. But bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Anything while I stop recording?